So good evening, everyone. And Katie, especially, welcome. First, want to thank everyone for taking, of course, some time out of your evening to be with Katie and me. I think we're probably getting far too used to this Zoom format by now. But I'm so pleased that we get to, at the very least, connect in this way. So on behalf of myself, Adam, and Devin, the Haas Financial Group team, we sincerely thank you for joining us tonight. While we remain focused on your financial health during this crazy pandemic situation, that's of course our commitment to you, our promise, our resolve. That's not the topic this evening. We certainly recognize that money, health, and happiness are not completely independent of each other. So we're going to remain committed to creating this type of venue to discuss health in other ways, just like we did with Dr. Karch 2 weeks ago. And now tonight we welcome Katie. And while I bet Katie is still probably capable of talking finance with us going back to her days at New York Life, Katie's going to help us check a different box right now, focusing on mental health, happiness, by sharing her experiences with significant challenges, how she was able to overcome them, and then, of course, how that kind of relates to today. All things I think we can benefit from during this, again, difficult and unique time in all our lives. So I couldn't be happier to have twisted Katie's arm into doing this. That's, of course, a little bit of a lie. Katie's not only a professional speaker, but she's not shy at all, and you'll find that out very quickly. She's got a lot of energy and passion for helping others. So again, just very grateful she's here. I'm hoping the teasers worked, that you took a little time to learn about Katie's story, but if not, I'll take the honor of introducing her now. I met Katie a couple months ago now after attending a conference last year, and just really connected with her and her story. And now, having gotten to know her fairly well, I share that I personally find her insights and perspective on life very motivating. While she is a professional speaker, there is nothing canned here. Katie was literally run over by an 18-wheel truck. That's not something anyone is supposed to survive, but of course she did. It took 10 hours of emergency surgery, many operations, and then when she woke, it was to a body and a life that was going to be forever changed. So the physical trauma, the mental trauma, it's all told now in her best-selling memoir, How to Get Run Over by a Truck. And we're gonna get to hear a lot about that tonight. But now Katie travels the country when she's allowed to do so, speaking on how to overcome what feel like huge obstacles, and in her words, through resilience, hope, humor, and gratitude. She's a life coach, professional speaker, and as I understand it, soon to be made famous by Ellen DeGeneres and some writers from Broadway, a team with Warner Brothers who are developing a 1-hour drama, right, Katie? Based on...
Well, dramedy. I mean, how can you not find the humor in this? You know what I mean?
Who knows? Maybe we're all going to look back on tonight and say, I met Katie.
That's right. And I saw inside your houses, which is the best.
So really excited that, Katie, you were generous with your time here to join us. So without further ado, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. And I mean, the feeling is deeply mutual. I know everybody who ever has the opportunity to work with Ben and Haas Financial Group just knows how much he cares about his clients and really cares for everybody in and around his orbit as well as the community. So it's a real honor to be sharing the Zoom with you this evening.
Well, thank you. So let's jump into it. There's, of course, a lot for us to talk about, and I know with some limited time. So let me maybe set the stage. I think I have 3 goals for where I'd like to go today. Let's share your story. It's, of course, context that I think we all need to have. We'll focus probably the majority of our time on your journey, right? How you got from A to B, getting over all the hurdles that you were facing. And as you kind of mentioned, we'll bring a little lightness to this too. So if I could, I know you've probably told the story a million times by now. Take us back to Brooklyn. This is October 2nd, 13 years ago?
Yeah, 12 years ago. It was October 2nd. It was a Tuesday morning. It was a beautiful, beautiful, like early fall morning. It was one of those like where the sun was like blindingly beautiful. I was just finishing up a it wasn't the sun, not yet, but it was like a gorgeous, gorgeous blue, like inky, almost like, just before dawn. I was just finishing up a 10-mile bike ride. And usually at that time, I would either run 5 miles or I would bike 10 miles. And this morning, I was just about to turn onto my block to finish up my ride. And I'm in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And I was kind of in the area right where, sort of like the residential area turned a little bit more industrial. So there were all these like low brick buildings and factories. And I saw the sun starting to rise over these buildings. And I was like, I want in on that. I think that this is going to be something that's like so special and really going to be like feeling like it's going to be like keeping a secret. And so I was at a green light and I did my signal and I showed the truck driver that was on my left-hand side. It was an 18-wheel truck. I signaled that I was making a right. He didn't have his indicator on, so I thought I was good to go. And there was a black Mazda behind that truck and I indicated and I saw them wave and they saw me. So again, it kind of iterated that I was completely safe. And the green light turned and I had my eyes like straight on that sunrise. And the green light happened and I took my wide turn right, like wide and really easy. And unfortunately, the truck that I thought was going straight wasn't. He was turning right. And he didn't see me. He didn't see my blue bicycle. He just saw a green light and he turned. And amazingly, I missed being run over by the cab of the truck, which is the heaviest part of the vehicle because that's where the motor is, and only by a few inches. But my body was run over by the first four wheels of the 18-wheeler. And then because the driver didn't know that he had hit me, I was run over by the second set of wheels. What happened then was that I broke all of my ribs. I fractured my pelvis in 5 places. I punctured both of my lungs, tore up a series of organs. And but the most amazing thing then is, if you couldn't get more amazing than that, again, here's the levity. I'm just kidding. That's heavy, you guys. But is that I was conscious during the entire event, which was the most incredible part of it. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is because I sort of needed to take it out of my brain, because I heard my bones cracking. I remember the feeling of the asphalt, like the olfactory sense. And you can smell something and you're like, brings you back exactly where you were. I remember the smell of the asphalt, everything. And I just kind of needed to write about it to kind of get it out of my head. But yeah, that was the experience itself. But I know that you were kind enough to read it. And the thing that's incredible about bad things is, when something bad happens, have you guys ever heard this from Mr. Rogers? Is that whenever something bad happens, his recommendation was to look for the helpers.
Yeah, and you talk about that a lot in your book.
Exactly, yeah. And that was kind of the first amazing thing, was that there was, there was a woman, her name was Giselle, who was in the car, in the Mazda. And she called my parents. Like, I was somehow or another able to remember my home phone number. And then there was a man who was wearing, I'll never forget it, he was wearing a Madras shirt, khaki cargo shorts, and a New York Yankees hat. And he came over to my spot on the asphalt and he took my hand and he said to me, "Listen to me. I'm a pastor. I've spoken to God and you're not going to die today." And I turned to him and I said, "Do you promise?" And he promised. It's like, if I didn't write about it, I was afraid that I might forget it. And things like that are just too brutal, brutal, but beautiful at the same time to forget.
Yeah. So let's then talk about that journey, because I know, certainly how you've shared it, not only in your book, but of course in many different venues now. Surviving it, of course, was number one, but you had to take on the challenge to kind of rebuild things. And that wasn't just, physically, but mentally, right? You've accomplished things certain doctors said you wouldn't. Spoiler alert, you're walking again.
I am. I'm super mobile, you guys. Don't worry. I'm moving around.
all of 9 months to be able to do that, which is certainly remarkable in itself. But again, that didn't come without a lot of physical and mental pain, right? Self-doubt is something you now talk about, right? It's a very real thing. Fear is a very real thing. It wasn't just the priest saying, hey, everything's going to be fine.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there was a lot. I was like, I believe you. And
Yeah. So let's, we all go through that fear and self-doubt at some point or another. So maybe, share some of your stories on self-doubt, feeling sorry for yourself. I know you have faith, but you were lacking faith at times. How were you able to get through those dark spaces between, okay, I've survived this, to now, my God, I need to completely redefine my life?
Absolutely. That's such a great question, Ben. I think, and truth be told, I mean, I was terrified every moment until I was intubated for surgery. And truth be told, I went into 10 hours of emergency surgery. Like when I was going into the hospital, into the ER, the doctor who was closest to my head, I asked her, I was like, do you think I'm going to live? And she looked me straight in the eye and she was like, probably not. I mean, that was what happened. And the fear and the terror of that, of being reminded about how fragile we are, and that's a moment that I think a lot of us are feeling right now, right? This is like a lot of fragility, a lot of fear, a lot of pain. And when I got out of surgery, when I was in surgery, I came within about 15 minutes of the doctors letting me go. And just because my blood wouldn't clot, and they were like, we can't give her any more blood. She's gotten taken as much as she can get. You know what I mean? Like, she's tapped out. That's fine. The bartender said last call. This is as many drinks as she's going to get. And the amazingly, within 15 minutes of them being like, we're going to give her an hour until we're going to let her die, my blood miraculously started clotting.
Yeah.
So that was like the first time, the fear of going into that, of being like, just the thing that's amazing. I wasn't afraid of dying. I wasn't afraid of what death was. I was just afraid of like not having the chance to live more.
Yeah.
I just felt like there was like more that existed, and I think there was that feeling of faith, and I held fast to my faith in those moments. But then when I got out of surgery, and I was in the ICU and was still recovering, a doctor that I spoke to, I asked him if he thought I was ever going to walk again. And he said, absolutely not.
Right.
No, you're definitely not going to walk again. And what do you do with that? I was 24 years old. I was used to hearing yeses. I was used to like, we can fix that. Don't worry about it. Like, you got plenty of time. We'll call somebody. We'll give you stitches, put a Band-Aid on it. No problem. And that was so terrifying because, at that age, you really don't have any context for believing that things won't somehow get better. And in those moments, especially because the pain was unbelievable, I was on fentanyl patches, and then on the same dosage that they would give to 300-pound men when they were dying of cancer was the same dosage that I got. And then I was on a morphine pump that hit every 6 minutes. Right. And I think that the thing that when I was feeling my darkest, I just felt like I got forgotten, But what was incredible about that was that I just knew that there are only two things in life that we can control. And I believe that is your attitude and your activity. And I knew that everything else was something that I could not control at all. And I was like, okay, if everybody's telling me no, then what that means is that the bar is incredibly low. Mm-hmm. So if I can like get like a tish over that bar, then I am a winner and everyone is going to be super proud of me, especially me. So sometimes you have this opportunity to like make no your favorite word, where you're like, okay, what's the worst case? I'm going to try and fail. I failed before and everything turned out kind of okay. Anything that's better than zero is going to be a real win. And I think that was the way that I was able to get positive, was to, number one, I had to start laughing at myself. Like, I had to. It was, I called the external fixator that was implanted in my body. I named him Roberto. He had a name, he had a bad attitude. Mm-hmm. And it was just trying to find, instead of fear, doing my best to be active, to think about if I'm feeling lonely or dark, I have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like I can't keep this to myself, you know? And I think that's also why it's wonderful to have people in your life, like not only your community, but also the people who are your trusted advisors, people you can reach out to and be like, I'm afraid about my future. How can we figure this out, and really bring it to light, and be able to talk about it in a very real way. And I think that was like a fast forward button to lightness, really was doing that outreach, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, you talk a lot about your support system and how important that was to you. And you talk a lot about, how you kind of redefined, you use the word little victories. I go back now to thinking about the part in that story where you've got that pump and it's allowing you every 6 minutes, but then you play a game with yourself. Could you extend it another minute, another 2 minutes? Give yourself the opportunity to call it a little win. And it wasn't, I have to walk immediately. It was, what can I do with what's right in front of me? And I found that really inspiring.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, truth be told, I think I'd probably watched like too many Hallmark Christmas movies by the time that this happened, where I was like, if I find the love of a good man, then I will just immediately start walking. I'll be just fine. And it'll be a Christmas miracle. But I think that, knowing that it wouldn't be something that I could do immediately, and that it was going to be something that would have to be strung together in a small bites and little victories way, was really helpful, because I think that the thing that had been happening to me, and I think happens to all of us, right, is that we think that the only time that we can celebrate, or the only way that something is worthwhile, is if it's like a really, really big win.
Right.
Like we get a promotion, or if we get a bonus, or something big happens. And we're always pushing ourselves for these like huge heights, and for it to be this big, big deal. And I knew that just like wasn't in the cards for me. I just wasn't going to be capable of that. And so the idea of like playing that game of trying to see what I could do to increase my pain tolerance by extending it an additional minute, or of trying to, like, sounds so silly, but like eat my whole breakfast, or like do these, there are those triangles above the hospital bed when you need to like shift yourself if you don't have feeling in your body below your rib cage. So I would be like up there, like doing little tiny pull-ups. It was very ridiculous, but I would tell everybody about it. And whereas in my past life, I'd be like, that isn't a big deal. Nobody wants to hear about that. I would tell everybody. And the best thing is that when you bring people in, when you tell them what you care about, when you let them know, like, I'm excited about this, and if they love you or they care about you at all, they're going to be excited with you, because being excited just feels good. It's kind of an amazing thing.
Yeah, and again, you had a lot of visitors. You talk about not only the family and friends that came to support you, but another thing that you said that you could control was kind of the kindness factor. And you were really good at being bubbly and making friends, making friends with the overnight janitors.
Yeah.
Anybody and everybody. Maybe, bring that to the here and now, right? Mm-hmm. We're all going through this kind of same event, maybe in different ways. But as we think about supporting each other, share with us how important that kindness and communication was for you during that time.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're so right. I've been saying this with clients a lot. And in the talks that I've been giving recently, is that right now it's the idea that we're all in different boats. But for the first time, I think, not ever, but like for a lot of people, we're all in the same storm. We're batting down the hatches in the best ways that we can. And what I found in my experiences, like, to speak to that community piece, is the closer that we bring each other, the more that we share, the more that we do our best to support each other, even in these times when we feel like we're not the best versions of ourselves, is incredible. I know that for me, I was definitely not the most fun that I've ever been, not surprisingly. But it was an incredible thing that even when it wasn't easy for other people, they kept showing up. They showed up in the calls, in the texts, in the one time friends sent over a mariachi band because they lived across the country, to play like Guantanamera in my hospital room. It was one of the most amazing things. Um, and they kind of like reminded me, and in the same way that we can kind of remind each other of the people that we are at our cores. Like right now, it's really hard to be the best version of yourself. You're trying to manage a lot of things. You're not able to see all the people that you want to see. And that can be really hard. And the thing that also is pretty incredible to me, I mean, I love the fact that I have the opportunity to speak with a financial advisor because, and with a group of people who work with financial advisors, is because I was very moved by the fact that we had like an incredible financial advisor like you. My parents and I share the same financial advisor, and the work that he did with me, like as a 23-year-old kid, telling me about what I needed to do before this crash happened to make sure that I had like thoughtful investments, that I'd bought short-term and long-term disability insurance. The conversations, like the hard conversations that this advisor had to have with my parents. If he were a different person, we would have been in such a different space, honestly. He spoke to them every week about, okay, what would happen if Katie is paralyzed? You know, will she become your ward? What will you do with your, will that look like? And who cares about you in these spaces is, it is literally, and I can say this and I mean it, it's life changing. It's absolutely life changing. It for me, it created the opportunity for my parents to stay with me and let me move into their house, into their again, because I'm here again. Moved out of So I was in Brooklyn. I'm in Vermont, and I was like, I'm at the retirement home. They're like, enough with you, please. Can you have no more tragedies, kid? We're over it. But that it allowed for them to kind of care for me and for me to be able to leave the hospital. So it's, it really is important to find the person who will care for you in the good times and in the bad times. And that community, it creates light in the darkness. It really does. And it grows and multiplies as much as you focus on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that angle too. Especially for everyone that's on here. So I guess I want to go back just a little bit then. If this was 2007. You kind of referenced, young 24.
Yes.
Clearly a lot
Still
of time.
super young. Still so young. I'm still so young.
But I know you refer to yourself now as kind of new Katie versus old Katie. So, everyone listening, everyone chiming into this, we don't want anyone to ever have to go through that physical or mental trauma like you did. But, then maybe share with us, what did you learn about yourself then through that time, and share with us and help us kind of look in the mirror a little bit, right? How does a trauma like that change you and now have prepared you for other challenges that come your way?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And yes, I mean, the thing that's amazing is that, I feel like I've been run over by a truck as a turn of phrase for a reason, right? I don't know and I'll ask you guys on Gallery View. I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever used the phrase, I feel like I've been run over by a truck.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. There's no shame. There's no shame in that game. I used to say it all the time. And because it's a real feeling, it's a real feeling that you feel like everything in your life has been broken into a million pieces and you're not really sure about how you're going to put those pieces back together again. And I think the things that I loved about old Katie that I still love, was her strength and her sense of humor and her positivity. But the things that I'm kind of okay with letting go of was her selfishness, her naivete, her kind of one-centeredness, and also the tight grasp that she had on material things as having like the most important worth. What getting run over by a truck and almost losing my life allowed for me to do was to really reassess what mattered. What are the things when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be thinking about, did like the kind of car that you drove. I promise you. All that you're thinking about is the things that matter the most. Your family, your mission, the people that you love, and of making sure that you were present in every moment, the good, the bad. Don't shut any of it out, because absolutely everything that we experience is there to teach us something. It's there to help us grow. And I think that the biggest thing is really like of understanding that for me personally, I know that there's no good reason why I should be alive. Like there is no doubt in my mind. But what I've decided to do with this tiny little life that I didn't deserve to get is to try to make every person that I meet, I want to make their life better for having me in it. I want for the universe to be like, glad I saved that egg. She was not so bad. She did all right, you know? I want for on like my balance sheet for it to be more credits than debts if possible.
Yeah. Listen to you. Yeah. So let's stick there, right? Clearly, you've made a career out of this coaching thing, and in different ways. Again, we all face adversity. I got run over by a truck moment.
Yeah.
Maybe share with us your tool bag then. It's Dr. Gordon in your book, who was helping you through therapy, and it struck me how direct you were, in saying, hey, we don't have to talk about my feelings. I'm cool. What were the tools to help you refocus, right? And not be so centered on the trauma, but on then looking forward. What's in the tool bag?
I love that. I think the idea, like the greatest gift that Dr. Gordon gave me was the idea that every time that we have a trauma, that we do have an opportunity to start again. Doesn't matter what it is, that we have this clean slate opportunity to sort of like reassess and take a hard look at what is the life that you want to live? What does that look like? When things shift, I think of it almost as if like with my accident, it was my vertical world turned horizontal. Yeah. And then I was trying to get back to vertical, degree by tiny degree. But with that in mind of being like, what does vertical look like? What is this new version of myself? And I think that that's a really big deal. Just being able to say like, choose it. You're as much as you can control what you can control. And in that small bites, little victories mindset of being like, take it small. There is a lot of things that you can control when you do have kind of an opportunity to. I think that there is also is trying to think through your mission. Like think about what you're here for, what matters to you, and lift that up, make that your priority. And I think that there's also of trying to be a positive person for other people after you like really, really think about what you can learn from each experience. When you've had your run over by a truck moment, like what are you learning? How are you growing? And I think that that's a really helpful thing. I will also say that gratitude is kind of a game changer for me. That's been really, really helpful. Trying to find when everything is taken, what is it that you still have? What are those things? And when you are grateful, it actually shuts down the pessimism in your mind, and it shifts the way that like the brain chemicals work and point you in a more positive direction, which is wonderful.
So let's stay there. How are you staying positive right now? You just shared you're newlywed.
Yes.
You're living in your parents' basement.
I'm living in my parents' basement. So.
Not really the place to be right now.
I know.
And not comparing to all the other things you've had to go through life, you still just maintain such a positive attitude. How do you do it? What is keeping you so positive?
I think the things that are keeping me positive right now is of trying to not trade this, whatever this is, for something that doesn't exist. I think sometimes having a deep acceptance of exactly what is here is a really helpful thing of being like, versus sometimes we have an aptitude, I know I do, is to like fight it and be like, I just don't want this to be happening. I just want to be back in Brooklyn. I want to go out for dinner. Like I want to see my friends. I want to go to the museum. I would like to go to the beach. Accepting like, this is exactly where I'm at right now. And that can be okay is very, very helpful. And trying to look for the gifts, what are the gifts that I'm receiving right now? Which time with my parents, help more time with people that I love. And I think that that's really helpful. I wind up being thankful for the ability to walk a lot. I know that sounds silly because everyone's like, because there were months when I couldn't, but trying to take a minute and be like, I can still walk. and that's amazing, is very, if you get down to like those little brass tacks, or you look for those magical moments that you don't normally see, it allows for you to really focus in on like what is good. And also I start to think about future me. I think about future me a lot. And I'm like, future me is going to have the best day when she can see her friends and when she's back in her apartment and, you know, has like a little bit of privacy. But that I think that thinking about that and picking that day is really, really helpful. And
Yeah,
some, yeah,
in your book that was one of your parents' ideas, that, you know, when you were well enough to be out of care, what was going to be the perfect day. You were doing that planning. You were trying to look forward. I love that.
yeah. Do you have thoughts, Ben, about what your perfect day is going to be?
I think right now, you know, we are just so done with homeschooling. We're so done with kind of just the isolation. It doesn't have to be something big. I mean, we're family people. It's a picnic. It's being outside and around other people. It's throwing the kids in a pool. I think it is, to your point, gratitude changes to the point where the perfect day are not the big things. It's not this huge trip. It's not some sort of miracle moment. It's going to be the little things that I think we're missing the most right now.
Right. And that's what I love is, I don't know if you found this in your conversations too, but people that I've been talking to, it's not that they're missing, you know, traveling. Maybe they're bummed about missing a trip, but they're not missing traveling. They're not missing like shopping for fancy clothes and wearing them out. They're missing hugs.
Yeah.
They're missing time with friends. They're missing family, you know, and it's such a good way of that. I feel like is kind of a positive thing, right? Is the ability to slow down for a second and say, wait, these are the things that matter to me, you know?
Yeah, I like
So,
the list idea. I think it's good for everyone to try to focus on that positive, make that list, and you know,
yeah.
it's almost like that mini post quarantine bucket list.
Yes.
That is something that gives us an opportunity to again just focus on the positive.
I love that. And also, you know, like in that moment of being like, what are all the things that we're saving on right now, right? Because maybe we're not spending in the same way that we were. Of being like, okay, well, if we're not, you know, we're not doing this thing, then we'll be able to bucket this in a different way and be like, this will be on we're bucking this in our bucket list.
I like it. I like it. So I had some other questions if I can throw them at you.
Of course.
Again, a little rapid fire. Some of my favorite,
Like I should stretch.
yeah, takeaways from you. Katie is as you will. You kind of hit on it a little bit ago. You talk about just being present, right? Living in the moment.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
I think being present to me is really acknowledging and being with people, like giving them your full attention, paying attention to things. I think that we live in a world where it's almost impossible. Everything is designed to steal our attention. That's its whole job. And I think that the greatest gift that we can give to one another is being present, either with ourselves, with our thoughts, or being present with somebody else, is giving them the gift of our full attention. And I think that kind of winds up being the biggest thing of saying to yourself, like, this is exactly where I want to be, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard.
Yeah,
Because
you talk about you blinked a whole 40 times, right? You know, you talk about being conscious through your whole accident, and all you wanted to do was not blink, right? Just absorb every bit of light that you could. You know, that was probably the number one example of just trying to be present as much as possible. Clearly, that's a traumatic event, but it was certainly one of my takeaways.
yeah, I love that was your takeaway. I think that there's so much to be said about like, we just want more, you know. It's that idea of like thinking that, no, you want the good, the bad, the ugly, you want all of it, you know. And that's I think something that we forget is don't rush it. Don't rush it, you know.
I'll throw at you your gratitude line. It's the I have to do this versus I get to do this.
Yes.
A little bit about
Oh,
that.
That is one of my favorites. And I love that you remember that. So it's the idea of, sometimes I know all of us wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, homeschooling, that like there is working from home. I'm not seeing my colleagues. I'm not seeing my family, whatever it is, the thing that you don't want to do. And you have to be like, oh, I wake up and it's like, I can't believe I have to do this. What I've tried to do, and that has really happened since my accident, is I get to go to the DMV. And actually that has shown up a lot because I'm turning 38 in October. And my friends are like, oh, I can't believe I'm getting older. I can't believe it. I was like, are you kidding me? This is the best. Do you know the alternative? Like, getting older is awesome. It's a privilege, you know? And that winds up being a really helpful way to see stuff, is like, if you treat your birthday like I'm sure your boys do, like when they get older, I know their birthday was a couple weeks ago, but they're like, I get to be 7, you know? If we approach that, then it helps a lot. It really does.
So I like the story you tell about your father in the hospital too. Tell us the keep punching.
Oh yeah,
You had.
that has actually shown up a lot for me since we've been in quarantine. I think it circles back to this idea of what I was saying about, you know, that we kind of put a lot of pressure on ourselves in a lot of moments. So when I was in the hospital, I was intubated and I was still barely conscious, and I was in the ICU, and my parents would, you know, be with me all day, and then they had to leave after visiting hours were over. And my mom would kind of like work her way around all the machines, and she would come and she would give me a kiss goodnight and say, I love you. And my dad would stand behind her and he would, you know, give me a kiss and say, I love you. But he would linger for just like that extra second. And he would whisper in my ear and he'd say, Katie, you have to promise me one thing before I go. Will you keep punching? I know that you're in the fight of your life. Baby girl, you are getting the crap kicked out of you. But will you keep punching? You don't have to win, sweet girl. Just keep swinging, okay? And what that did was that it just reminded me that there was a fight in me, that there was something that I couldn't touch and I hadn't touched. And it allowed for me to remember that, like, listen, you don't have to win. You just have to stay in the game.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be a knockout. It's just, maybe you just get enough points and then you'll be in it. And that just helped me so much. And I think that's what resilience is, right? It's just the ability to come back. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be messy and it can be hard, but you come back, you keep swinging.
Yeah. You talk about resilience like a rubber band.
Yeah. Yeah. Resilience it's a rubber band that, like, you know, once it happens one time and we snap back and we'll get another yank, and then it kind of gets a little bit loose, and it's harder and harder to have that snap back. And those are the moments when our rubber band needs a breath. Sometimes we need to just take a minute, unplug, stop putting pressure on ourselves, and just take a deep, deep breath. And I think that's an important thing. And then we get like a little bit of our pullback, but it helps a lot, I think. I know this is something that I've talked about before too. And this is and with all of us being connected via Zoom and the amount of work that we're doing, especially in conjunction with being with our kids or grandkids, it's that we do also need to, and this is something that I feel really strongly about, is that there is almost nothing in the world that can't be fixed, like without you unplugging it and then plugging it back in. And then you plug it back in and then everything is right as rain. So just, you know, don't be afraid to take that minute. It's good for you. Exactly.
Hammer on the side of the machine, it'll work.
Exactly. Or, I mean, you know, for me, Ben, I feel like you can relate. It's like you take the Nintendo game and you go, you know, and they'll do it every time.
So another one, this is more going back to your book, but, and I know it's a little debate between you and your brother, so you can choose whether you tell the story or not, but
okay.
Put out kindness and kindness is returned.
Yes. Oh, great question. So my older brother had this thought in what he had said to me, that I believed that kindness was just something that you give because it's right. And that's actually very unselfish. And he kind of thought, he's like, no, kindness is something that is actually selfish, because when you do it, you're doing it for yourself, and that you're doing it so that you can feel good. My take on that is, yeah, I think that it can be a mutually beneficial situation. I think that everybody could feel good. I think that that's the reason why we do it, is that we want to do good because it feels good. But I will say, I think, like, to circle back to what we were talking about before, is the idea of, like, I think that the kindness that we give, the greatest one that I think is probably the most unselfish, is our full undivided attention. I think that winds up being kind of a thing that you do that, like, can be really beneficial to you, but also is really beneficial to the other person, just allowing them to be fully seen. And personally, I feel like I've had, I don't know, I know that a bad thing happened to me, but I have a life more beautiful than I ever anticipated, and better than I ever thought. And that's kind of the reason why I want to keep on giving kindness, because, again, the debts and credits, I just want to make sure that I kind of even it out a little.
Well, again, I keep going back to the book. I feel like this is a whole plug for your book. Everybody go.
I know that there's a spoiler alert that everything turned out awesome. So,
but you talk about having two very different care experiences too. So going back to kindness and how you were treated, the people that not only had to care for you, but then, like, hey, double dose of therapy, like, they kind of just let it happen, apparently.
Exactly, I know.
Talk about those two different experiences and what kindness really meant to you, and now how it, of course, shapes the way that you not only talk about it, but the way you live your life.
Yeah. So at the first hospital that I was at, it was actually a penal hospital. So I was with prisoners who were at Rikers Island and had gotten injured. And
well, rewind this just real quickly. Like, you were conscious enough to tell the emergency people where you wanted to go.
I really wanted to live, Ben. I was really desperate to live. Yeah, I knew that the closest hospital was not a good hospital. So I told them to take me to the best trauma hospital. And the EMTs told me that I would probably die on the way to the hospital. But I told them to take me anyway. Yeah, luckily, again, spoiler alert, I didn't die, but came real close. But but when I was there, when I was at that hospital, unfortunately, the people were overworked and underpaid, and I was denied pain medication on a series of occasions.
Yeah.
I went through, like, full morphine withdrawal, unfortunately, and just, like, which was awful. I wasn't fed a series of times. They would just leave food and water far enough away from my bed that I couldn't walk to get it, and I couldn't grab it. And it was before I wouldn't be able to eat until my parents came in. And I just felt like what it did, which was kind of incredible, is that it made me think that I was unworthy of kindness or care. I thought that it was my fault. That I thought that because I was so broken, that it made me unlovable or unworthy. And I didn't feel like a human being. And that was really, really hard, because I felt like I deserved it. Afterwards, we were lucky enough in that my parents were able to help me to get transferred to a different hospital, which was a great rehabilitation hospital. And those doctors and nurses made me feel seen. They asked me questions about myself. They were interested in telling me that I would be successful. They were like, we don't know what's going to happen, but here are the ways in which you've already done a great job, and you feel really proud of yourself,
Yeah, they built you up.
They did, exactly. There was encouragement, and they also did small things like let me choose, like, what breakfast cereal I wanted to have. And that made me feel like I was like a person in the world. I felt like I was at, like, the Waldorf Astoria. I was like, some service, this is incredible.
Yeah, so the two different experiences, going back to essentially the emergency first couple weeks, being in intensive care, I know our audience here, talk a little bit about your faith journey, like coming into that event, that difficult time, and then of course coming out of it.
Yeah. Going into it, I was always a faith-filled person. I went to church every Sunday, and I was very much a believer. And when I was going into the hospital, at first, like in the ICU, I was like, okay, still very much faith-filled. But then after I got into into the hospital where I didn't have great care, I was like, why would God let this happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a nice person. I don't understand. Like, what did I do to deserve this? And I got really, I got angry with God. I was like real mad at him. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to like give God the silent treatment, and I'm just not going to talk to him. And we're just not going to talk. And that lasted for like a strong couple days. And then I was like, I miss talking to God. I miss praying. Like, this isn't a good feeling. And, it was the only person who I felt like the only entity that really I felt like understood me and was always present. And I think that what happened is my anger turned to understanding of being like, if not me, then who? Kind of a feeling of this was done for a reason, Katie, and you have to find out what that reason is. That's your responsibility. God didn't forget you. This was just what was meant for you. And it shifted my faith in that it helped me to understand that like I had a mission to fulfill, and my responsibility was to help other people who were struggling. And that's kind of, there had to be, in my mind, I keep on, for a while, I was just trying to figure out why God saved me. And I wasn't really sure for a while, because I know that there are plenty of incredible people who didn't have that same opportunity. So I couldn't waste it. And I think it's made me double down on my faith of just being like, that you got to figure out what that reason is. And you have to make sure that you're doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. And even there, so your journey coming out of this and now becoming motivational speaker, writing your book, getting to travel the country to kind of share your story. You didn't just jump right into that, right?
No.
many years where you're not doing that. So, even there, talk about that leap of faith where you've really kind of met your calling.
Yeah.
Kind of share this story and try to help motivate people.
Sure. I mean, I think that it was a little bit of an interesting thing. I wrote the book while I was in the hospital, and then I continued to write it after I went back to my job working in finance as a wholesaler. And I did that in the mornings before work. I'd write for 2 hours. I'd get up at 5 a.m, write for 2 hours, take a shower, go into the city, work a whole day, edit during lunch, and I kind of, and then by the time that I kept working on it, working on it after work, I kind of inched my way towards the book getting published. And that wound up being such a big win for me. Although I will say that in speaking to like when people say no, the book got rejected 125 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that there were 125 agents were like, this story is not very interesting. The main character is not very likable. And I was like, what am I gonna do with that? Like, if getting run over by a truck isn't interesting, like I'm in big trouble. I will never be cool. But I was able to find kind of a workaround to get the book published, which was amazing. You just need one. I continued to work in finance, and then with that idea of feeling like I should try to give back to the world, I worked at a nonprofit and spent a few years there. And then finally I was able to get the book published. And when that happened, it became a bestseller, which was so amazing. And then I started to do readings and talks, and then it started to build from there. I started to give these talks, and the audiences got bigger and bigger. And then at the talks afterwards, people would be like, it sounds like you've overcome some things that my challenges are smaller, but I think I can use the same tools that you've used in order to overcome these challenges. And I was like, you know what? My life is precious, And if God is kind of putting this in my way, then this is the time to jump. And it's been a really, really wonderful way for me to kind of find what it is I think that is my purpose in life. And what I would recommend is, again, like taking it in a small bites and little victories way of like trying to like take small steps towards it. Maybe like seeing what works for you, seeing what makes you feel good, and making bold choices. Putting yourself out there is probably the hardest, but the most important thing that we can do, because you don't know how many people want to work with you or want for you to be a part of their lives unless you kind of ask. And not being afraid of the no's, I guess, is the biggest thing that I can recommend, is making sure that you know that a no doesn't mean a failure. It just means that maybe that opportunity isn't the right one, and that you can always find a workaround.
Yeah, love it. So I know I'm looking at my clock here. We're kind of getting up against it a little bit. I was taking a couple notes as we went here. I think I'll go through my like 3 big takeaways, and you can kind of chime in here. I think the first thing I took was attitude is everything, right? You say that in your book too. You know, you kind of have the opportunity to look at certain things and say, okay, this stinks. You know, feel sorry for yourself. You certainly can live in that dark space,
Yeah.
but focus on the things you can control. That was my takeaway. What can I influence to make this better? What can I do to press forward? I think that's such an important takeaway today. The first step is kind of dealing with the hurdle, and dealing with the hurdle is attitude.
Yeah.
That's my number 1 here.
Yeah. Totally agree.
2, I know we talked about communication, you know, and kindness, you know, someone telling you to just keep punching, you know, pick you up, literally when you were down. So kindness and communication, I think they're critical ingredients, of course, in this new world, especially because we can't be face to face with many people as often. So, you know, that'll be my takeaway too. When I get home tonight, pick up the phone, give somebody a call.
And if you're feeling like you want to connect with somebody else really wants to connect with you. You'll be surprised at how elated they will be to hear from you. Just you saying like, I was thinking of you. It makes someone feel so, so good to be like, I was thinking of you.
The last one I wrote down here, it's hope, right? I guess it's, you know, to kind of piggyback off of your comments on faith. It's why I feel rooted in faith, right? But part of that is giving yourself hope. And I guess I'll parlay that into maybe the 4th thing, my takeaway. I'll combine these into 2. You know, set some goals, no matter how small. I like your comment on little victories matter, right? My takeaway is let's have a plan for the other side of this, a little bucket list. Who are the people I want to see? What are the little things I missed that I want back in my everyday life? What little milestones am I chasing, and how can I reinvent myself? So I love that. That's my 4th takeaway here.
I love it. I think that's great. And you're exactly right. I think that we're creatures of hope, right? And that's what keeps us going. It's waking up every day and believing that it can be better than the day before. Yeah.
I'm going to turn it back to you for one last story. I know we kind of promised here, and it was your idea that, you know, we kind of end this on a high note here. Gratitude and champagne. Why don't you tell us the story?
Well, I'm delighted. So champagne is a big part of my family, the way that we've always been champagne people. But it got crazier after I got home from the hospital. My dad, who was the first person who was on long-term, short-term disability in order to take care of me, he started buying champagne by the case. It did not matter who came over and what time. Like our parish priest came over and he was like, champagne, Father? And it didn't matter if it was Friday, you know, a Thursday at 5:55, or if it was Tuesday at 10 a.m. My dad was running to the fridge to take out a perfectly chilled bottle. And at that time, I think that I was having a little bit of problems with the idea of celebrating. It kind of took me a while to get there. And he would go and he would pour a glass for me. You know, I was still not mobile, in my hospital bed. And he would actually pull out like our finest crystal, which, because I'm at the house, I've got this crystal that was my great-grandmother's. And he'd pour a glass for the visitor and then one for me in my hospital bed. And he'd raise his glass and he'd say, always, always remember, life is the celebration. and in that moment, I understood what gratitude truly was, right? It wasn't the big things. It was, the feeling of my foot touching the floor for the first time in months. It
Yeah.
was my mom wheeling me outside to feel the first snowflakes of winter on my tongue. It was champagne, like just because, stuff that I hadn't really thought of as being a big deal suddenly took on this brand new weight. And I just felt so incredibly grateful for those small, tiny moments that I'd blown off before. They now became what made life worth living. And they made me feel really grateful to be with you today, Ben. Thank you so much. And thanks you all so much for listening to my story. I'm so, so grateful for that, and for your time and for your attention. It's really has been so lovely. And now that we're done, I'm just going to take a little sip of this guy.
Well, I was gonna say, do you want to then lead us in a toast?
Oh,
So you,
absolutely. And I had a drink first, bad manners. Um,
whatever you have in front of you.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say, I hope that every single one of your lives are a celebration, and cheers. And I hope that you all stay happy and safe and wonderful. And yeah, thanks again so much for having me.
Perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, Katie. Again, thank everyone for joining us. So many good things to take away, and again, I just think it's so timely with how we're kind of thinking and feeling about the world. So hopefully everybody got some tools in the toolkit here. But again, we're so grateful for your time, Katie, and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me. It was so lovely to meet you all. Have a great night.
You.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye.